There was moment you became predictable, not moment she lost interest. Moment you stopped being interesting, not moment she changed. Moment you stopped changing, not moment relationship failed. Moment you stopped succeeding at being unpredictable. Predictable isn't about what you do. Predictable is about what you stop doing. Isn't about actions you take. Is about actions you stop taking. Isn't about becoming something. Is about stopping being something. Most men don't notice this moment, don't recognize this crossing, don't see this transformation. They just notice eventual result. Notice distance, notice cooling, notice loss. But distance is result, not cause. Cooling is symptom, not disease. Loss is outcome, not origin. Origin is moment you became predictable. Moment you crossed invisible line from interesting to routine. Moment unpredictability died and predictability replaced it. And crossing this line changes everything, because predictability is death of attraction, is elimination of desire, is end of wanting. Predictability doesn't reduce interest. Predictability eliminates interest. Doesn't lower attraction, removes attraction. Doesn't decrease desire, kills desire. You think becoming predictable is gradual process, is slow decline, is gentle slide. But it's not. There's specific moment, exact crossing, precise instant when unpredictability ends and predictability begins. Before this moment, your unknown variable. After this moment, your solved equation. Before your question, after your answer. Before your possibility, after your certainty. And certainty is death of interest. What creates this moment? What generates this crossing? What produces this transformation? Not single action, accumulation, not one choice, pattern, not isolated incident, systemic shift. You stopped surprising, stopped varying, stopped evolving, stopped introducing new, stopped being source of unknown, stopped generating uncertainty, and stopping these things created predictability. But there's specific way this happens. Specific process by which interesting becomes predictable. Specific mechanism by which variable becomes constant. You establish pattern, pattern becomes expected. Expectation becomes certainty. Certainty becomes predictable. Every person starts as unknown, starts as variable, starts as source of surprise, starts as generator of uncertainty. This is what makes person interesting. What creates attraction? What generates desire? But then person does something, establishes behavior, creates pattern, and pattern is beginning of predictability. Pattern itself isn't problem. Pattern becoming absolute is problem. Pattern having no variation is problem. Pattern being completely certain is problem. You text her every morning. This creates pattern. Pattern becomes expected. She knows you'll text every morning. Knowing becomes certainty. Certainty eliminates surprise. Elimination of surprise is beginning of predictable. You call every night. You say yes to every request. You're available every time. You respond within minutes every message. You do same things every weekend. You react same way every situation. Each pattern you establish, each behavior you make consistent, each response you make certain, each action you make predictable. You're moving closer to moment, closer to crossing, closer to transformation from interesting to predictable. And crossing happens when patterns cover everything, when nothing about you remains unknown, when every response is certain, when every behavior is expected, when every action is predictable. At that moment, at that crossing, you stop being person who generates interest. You become pattern that generates boredom. Stop being source of attraction, become source of routine. Stop being variable, become constant. Constant doesn't create interest. Constant eliminates interest, doesn't generate attraction, removes attraction, doesn't produce desire, kills desire. But predictability has layers, has levels, has depths. Surface predictability is one thing. Deep predictability is another. Surface predictability is predictable behaviors. Deep predictability is predictable being. You can vary behaviors while remaining predictably yourself, can change actions while staying same person, can mix routines while maintaining same core. Deep predictability is when core becomes known, when essence becomes understood, when self becomes solved, when who you are fundamentally stops being question and becomes answer. And answer doesn't generate interest. Question generates interest. Known doesn't create attraction. Unknown creates attraction. Solved doesn't produce desire. Unsolved produces desire. Most men become predictable at both levels, surface and deep. Behaviors become certain and self becomes known. Actions become expected and essence becomes understood. Routines become fixed and core becomes solved. Total predictability is death of everything, is elimination of all interest, is removal of all attraction, is killing of all desire. But there's specific moment this becomes irreversible. Specific point where predictability becomes permanent. Specific crossing where interesting can't return. Moment she stops checking what you'll do. Moment she stops wondering who you are. Moment she stops being curious about you. Moment wondering dies is moment predictability won. Before this moment, there's still variability in her mind, still uncertainty about you, still questions unanswered, still aspects unknown. After this moment, there's no variability, no uncertainty, no questions, no unknown. You're completely mapped, entirely understood, fully solved. And being solved is being finished. Being mapped is being done. Being understood completely is being known completely. And being known completely is being predictable completely. Complete predictability is complete loss of interest, is total elimination of attraction, is absolute death of desire. What men don't understand is predictability isn't about being boring. Predictability is about being known, isn't about doing boring things, is about being completely understood, isn't about lack of activities, is about lack of mystery. You can do exciting things and be predictable if person knows you'll do them. Can have interesting hobbies and be predictable if person understands why you have them. Can take adventures and be predictable if person knows how you'll respond to them. Predictability isn't activity-based. Predictability is knowledge-based. Isn't about what you do, is about how much is known about what you'll do, what you'll think, what you'll feel, what you'll be. When everything is known, everything is predictable. When nothing is unknown, nothing is interesting. When no questions remain, no curiosity remains, and no curiosity is no interest. No interest is no attraction. No attraction is no desire. This is why predictability is death, is ending, is finish. But there's specific progression by which you become predictable. Specific stages through which you pass. Specific levels you descend. Stage 1 is behavioral consistency. You establish patterns, create routines, make responses certain. This is surface predictability. This reduces novelty, reduces surprise, reduces uncertainty about actions. But person can still be interested because even if behaviors are known, person isn't fully known. Even if patterns are certain, core isn't fully understood. Even if responses are expected, self isn't fully solved. Stage 2 is emotional consistency. Your feelings become known. Your reactions become understood. Your emotional patterns become mapped. Person knows what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you angry, what makes you excited. Emotional mapping reduces mystery, reduces unknown, reduces questions. Person isn't wondering about your internal experience anymore, isn't curious about your feelings, isn't uncertain about your reactions. Stage 3 is intellectual consistency. Your thoughts become predictable. Your opinions become known. Your perspectives become understood. Person knows what you'll think about everything, what you'll say about anything, what position you'll take on any issue. Intellectual predictability removes last uncertainty, removes final mystery, removes remaining unknown. Person knows not just what you do and what you feel, but what you think. Stage 4 is existential consistency. Who you are becomes completely known. Your essence becomes fully understood. Your core becomes entirely solved. Person knows you fundamentally, understands you completely, has you mapped entirely. This is total predictability, is complete knowing, is absolute certainty. And absolute certainty is absolute death of interest. At this stage, relationship isn't relationship anymore, is routine, isn't connection, is habit, isn't alive, is automatic, And automatic doesn't generate desire, doesn't create attraction, doesn't produce interest. Automatic just continues until it stops. What makes person unpredictable? What maintains interest? What preserves attraction? Variation, evolution, growth, change, mystery, unknown, uncertainty. You vary behaviors, so patterns don't become absolute. You evolve emotionally, so reactions don't become mapped. You grow intellectually, so thoughts don't become known. You change fundamentally, so essence doesn't become solved. But varying, evolving, growing, changing, these require energy, require effort, require intention, require consciousness. Most men don't put in this energy, don't make this effort, don't have this intention, don't maintain this consciousness. They relax into patterns, settle into routines, stop varying, stop evolving, stop growing, stop changing. And stopping these things creates predictability, creates certainty, creates complete knowing, creates depth of interest. Men think comfort creates attraction. Think consistency builds security. Think predictability demonstrates reliability. But comfort kills attraction. Consistency eliminates mystery. Predictability destroys desire. What women want isn't comfort, is aliveness, isn't consistency, is growth, isn't predictability, is evolution. A live person is unpredictable person. Growing person is mysterious person. Evolving person is uncertain person. And unpredictable is interesting. Mysterious is attractive. Uncertain is desirable. But maintaining unpredictability requires you to never be fully known, never be completely understood, never be entirely solved. This doesn't mean being inconsistent, means being complex, doesn't mean being unreliable, means being deep, doesn't mean being chaotic, means being layered. Complex person has depths that take time to know. Deep person has layers that take effort to understand. Layered person has aspects that remain unknown even after years. But shallow person gets known quickly. Simple person gets understood easily. Unlayered person gets solved completely. And once solved, once understood, once known, predictability is achieved and interest is dead. Most men are shallower than they think, simpler than they believe, more unlayered than they imagine. They think having hobbies makes them deep, having opinions makes them complex, having routines makes them interesting. But hobbies get known, opinions get understood, routines get mapped, and once mapped person is predictable. True depth comes from continuous growth. True complexity comes from ongoing evolution. True layers come from constant change. Person who grows continuously can't be fully known because knowing becomes outdated. Person who evolves constantly can't be completely understood because understanding becomes obsolete. Person who changes regularly can't be entirely solved because solution becomes invalid. Growth creates moving target. Evolution creates shifting mystery. Change creates renewable unknown. And moving target maintains interest. Shifting mystery maintains attraction. Renewable unknown maintains desire. But most men stop growing, stop evolving, stop changing. They reach certain point and maintain, reach level and plateau, reach state and settle. Maintenance is death, plateau is ending, settling is finish. Moment you stop growing is moment you start dying. Moment you stop evolving is moment you start ending. Moment you stop changing is moment you become completely knowable. And completely knowable is completely predictable. And completely predictable is completely uninteresting. This is moment, this is crossing, this is transformation. Moment you stopped growing is moment you became predictable. Moment you plateaued is moment interest began dying. Moment you settled is moment attraction started ending. And most men don't notice this moment because it feels like arriving, feels like achieving, feels like succeeding. You reached stable point, established consistent self, achieved steady state, and achieving these things feels like winning. But in attraction, stability is loss, consistency is failure, steadiness is death. Attraction requires instability, mystery requires inconsistency, desire requires unsteadiness, not chaotic instability, Evolutionary instability, not random inconsistency, growth inconsistency. Not dangerous unsteadiness, developmental unsteadiness. Person who's growing is unstable in sense of not being fixed. Person who's evolving is inconsistent in sense of not being static. Person who's changing is unsteady in sense of not being permanent. And this kind of instability is attractive. This kind of inconsistency is interesting. This kind of unsteadiness is desirable. But person who's fixed is stable in deadly way. Person who's static is consistent in boring way. Person who's permanent is steady in predictable way. You became predictable the moment you stopped being in motion, stopped being in flux, stopped being in development. Motion creates uncertainty. Flux creates mystery. Development creates unknown. And uncertainty is interesting. Mystery is attractive. Unknown is desirable. Stillness creates certainty. Fixedness creates clarity. Permanence creates knowing. And certainty is uninteresting. Clarity is unattractive. Knowing is undesirable. You think becoming stable person is achievement, is goal, is success. But stable person is known person. Known person is predictable person. Predictable person is undesired person. This is paradox most men don't understand. Paradox that destroys most relationships. Paradox that ends most attractions. Becoming better version of yourself makes you more predictable. Achieving stable self makes you more knowable. Reaching final form makes you more certain and more predictable, more knowable. More certain is less interesting, less attractive, less desirable. Solution isn't to not improve. Solution is to never stop improving. Isn't to not achieve stable self, is to never achieve final stable self. Isn't to not reach form, is to never reach final form. Continuous improvement means continuous uncertainty. Endless development means endless mystery. Perpetual growth means perpetual unknown. Person who's improving continuously can't be predicted because improvement creates new. Person who's developing endlessly can't be known because development creates change. Person who's growing perpetually can't be solved because growth creates different. This is only way to avoid becoming predictable, to never stop evolving, to never finish growing, to never complete changing. Moment you complete is moment you become predictable. Moment you finish is moment you become known. Moment you stop is moment you become uninteresting. Most men complete, finish, stop. They reach version of themselves they like and maintain it. Reach level they're proud of and plateau there. Reach form they accept and settle into it. And maintaining is predictability. Plateauing is certainty. Settling is complete knowing. You became predictable the moment you decided this is who you are and stopped becoming different version. Decided this is your level and stopped reaching higher. Decided this is your form and stopped evolving further. That decision, that moment, that choice is moment you became predictable. And becoming predictable is beginning of end, is start of loss, is origin of death. Not immediate death, slow death, not instant loss, gradual loss. Not sudden end, progressive end, but death nonetheless. Loss nonetheless, end nonetheless. You became predictable. And predictable is eventually eliminated, is ultimately replaced, is finally left. Not because you became bad person, because you became known person. Not because you did wrong things, because you stopped doing new things. Not because you failed, because you stopped succeeding at being mystery. Most men don't see this until it's finished. Don't recognize this until it's over. Don't understand this until it's done. They wonder what happened, what changed, what went wrong. What happened is you became predictable. What changed is you stopped changing. What went wrong is you stopped evolving. And without change, there's no interest. Without evolution, there's no attraction. Without growth, there's no desire. This is truth most men avoid. Reality most men deny. Fact most men resist. But avoiding doesn't change truth. Denying doesn't alter reality. Resisting doesn't eliminate fact. You became predictable the moment you stopped being unpredictable. Became known the moment you stopped being unknown. Became certain the moment you stopped being mysterious. And that moment determines everything that comes after.